Yeah, it's always sort of because you like.
First of all, sorry, I'm Carrie Barber. So this is defense for Aya Sato. First, she's going to present for about how long will your defense or your presentation be?
Like 30 minutes, I think.
Okay, about a 30-minute presentation, and then we will open it up for any guests, online or in person, who might have comments or questions. And then after the guests have a chance to ask or questions or make comments, then after it's time, then we'll ask the guests to leave, and her committee will stay, and the committee will ask additional questions or make additional comments. And then the committee will ask Aya to step out while they deliberate, if it's pass or pass with revisions, or don't pass with the options that are available. So we'll ask Aya to step out for just a moment outside, and then we'll come back in, and your committee will tell you basically the process.
Okay.
Thank you for coming, the guests. Thank you to our committee members, our committee group.
Amber and Meredith Oda.
And Meredith Oda from History.
Yes,
And
history department.
So.
Okay, looks good. So thank you everyone for So thank you everyone for coming today. I'm really excited to be presenting today on this year-long project. It's been a very long time coming, and it's been a lot of hard work, but it's also been really rewarding for me, since this was a very personal journey as well, not only looking at like the overall like Japanese experience, but also how I fit into that culture, being part of a diaspora. And if you are interested, I have a QR code here that has links to the manuscript and the fully illustrated ebook. So that's a menu there. There are also a few sample photos, but we'll look into a lot more today. And if you need it later, I also have the same code in like the flyers that I made. There's one right outside the grad lab door if you need it later. So let's start with an introduction. So as I said before, this thesis was also an exploration of my own identity. So in December of 2021, for Christmas, my dad got me an Ancestry.com DNA testing kit. And in that, I found out that I was 85% Japanese and 15% Southern Japanese Islander. So Japanese and Japanese. But with that also came in all the questions that I had about my identity that I've always had my whole life. But these results just made me ask more questions, because sometimes I feel like I don't really fit into one label. And even though I may look Japanese, I don't always necessarily identify with a Japanese national, because we have different experiences. And this is an old photo of 1-year-old Aya in my first and only so far visit to Japan when I was 1 year old. So I have no memories of that trip. So I basically consider that I've never been to Japan. And being like Japanese, being like part of the country like that is a big part of identity. So that is one of the problems that I've had in connecting myself with my own culture. So I was actually born and partially raised in São Bernardo, Brazil. This is a picture of Rio de Janeiro, but I live in a town next to São Paulo, the biggest like city by population in Brazil. And I was partially raised there, like I said, until I immigrated with my parents in 2006 to the US. And at home, we speak Brazilian Portuguese, English, and Japanese. So we always joke that we kind of made our own language where nobody like really understands us outside of our own family, because in one sentence we'll mix everything. So it gets very complicated. And I've always been very interested in Japanese culture, whether that be pop culture like anime and manga, kawaii style, fashion, food, and so much so that in high school, I was the founder and president of the Asian Culture Club for all 4 years of high school. And in there, I kind of like was a teacher where I taught students about different aspects of Asian culture, like Japan, China, the Philippines, Korea, things that might interest them. So yeah, kind of like what I'm doing right now. And while I'm grateful for the massive privilege and perspectives that I have because of my multicultural identity, this again also creates conflict in what I even call myself. So am I Japanese? Am I Brazilian? Am I American? Now that I'm a US citizen? And I find that I'm not any one of these because each of these labels don't fit me anymore. I am more like all of them at once. And this thesis looks at the complexity of identity and what identity means, especially for mixed race and diaspora individuals like me. So for this thesis, I interviewed 8 Japanese women, and my grandpa here was the voice for my great-grandma Setsue, since I never got to meet her. So, and each of these individuals shared, again, the complexities and the different perspectives, because we're all Japanese, but we all have very different views and experiences on what being Japanese even means. And we can all learn from each other from our different experiences. So now, why the Disney princesses? It seems pretty random. Oh. Not only am I a really big fan of the Disney princesses, but there are also 3 main reasons why I chose them as an analytical lens. So reason number 1, the princesses and real Japanese women actually share many of the negative stereotypes formed around gender roles and agency. So Japan is very traditionalist, and in my research, I read Professor Ichiro Boki's book, Gender Personality in Japanese Society, that looks into traditional and often really strict gender roles and expectations that come with them. Sorry. And in this book, there was a study from 1972 where male and female students from junior high school until university age were asked their opinions on gender expectations. And the survey identified a very high degree of activity and intelligence expected from males and beauty and submissiveness from females. This is a chart that I recreated from the book. And as you can see, there's a very prominent dichotomy with active versus submissive, daring versus sensitive, and independent versus dependent, showing that in Japanese culture, traits associated with males are more socially desirable. And I also brought my bachelor's thesis book that I wrote last year. I went directly to grad school right after graduation. So it was very challenging doing these huge projects very close to each other, but it was also on the Disney princesses. And because I focused on my undergrad degree on PR and visual development, I looked into the marketing evolution of the Disney Princess brand. Sorry. And it's very easy to forget that the Disney Princess brand wasn't always around. It was actually created in the year 2000, so it's still a pretty new like phenomenon. And it was it was very crazy to me to learn that Disney didn't really think about selling their like characters and merchandise before. So in the year 2000, the CEO of Disney Consumer Products, he went to a Disney on Ice show and he saw that moms had DIY'd princess dresses for their daughters because Disney didn't sell them, which is crazy to me. And now like they're all over the place and they have very different, like a lot of products in very different areas. And branding, unfortunately, heavily relied on the superficial fantasy of a princess. So as you can see, like the official illustrations were very decorated with jewels and tiaras and big ball gowns and glitter. Not only to help sell these newly formed dresses that Disney was selling, but also to sell like the idea of a princess that Disney thought little girls would want. And parents, and especially mothers, were very critical of these branding messages, saying that the princesses were materialistic, weak, passive, dependent, overly emotional, and bad role models. And as you can see, was a big difference between what you saw in the movie, like Mulan, and versus what you could buy. So this is like directly the opposite of what Mulan was in the movie, but characters like her were still expected to fit the princess mold, even if it didn't fit their character in the movie. And the Disney Princess brand is just one example of feminine representation in media not taken as seriously or not shown to be desired. And girly girl stereotypes generalize the female experience where princesses and real women are expected to be just one hollow thing, but we're obviously more complicated than that. And reason number 2, the Disney Princess's worldwide recognizability can provide a foundation for discussions of real issues. So this is a screenshot from Zara Brownless's TED Talk on the biggest character franchises in the world. And it shows that in 2016, the revenue for the Disney Princess brand was $2.7 billion and Frozen was $1.6 billion. So if you didn't know before, Frozen, even though Anna and Elsa are princesses and queens, they aren't considered official Disney princesses because they were just too big and popular to fit the traditional princess brand. So they just became their own thing. But together, their revenue beats characters and franchises like Mickey Mouse, Hello Kitty, Star Wars, Avengers, and Barbie. So they're clearly very popular and show how most people know at least some version of these fairy tales and characters. And their themes and lessons can be a good way to express feelings and explain perspectives to someone who maybe hasn't had those experiences before. So an example that I often tell people was like using Ariel, the Little Mermaid, to explain the experience, excuse me, to explain the experience of a mixed race person going between two worlds. So these characters can be like a helpful start to a conversation. And reason number 3, with Asian heroines being so rare in mainstream media, representation advocates for more diverse characters and stories. So this is a graphic I made in graphic design class in 2020. And as you can see, there are only 1.3% of lead roles in movies that go to Asians, and only 1 out of 20 speaking roles goes to Asians. So representation is really important and it affects how we see ourselves. With many fairy tales, hold on. Try to move this. with many fairy tales being based on European like folklore. A lot of these characters have European beauty standards and traits. And my friend and a screenwriter who's Vietnamese Mexican, she explained to me how as a girl, she would see like Cinderella and Aurora, and she would question why she wasn't blonde and considered beautiful. It made her hate like her black hair and brown eyes. So representation is definitely very important, especially to children. And in 2018, I made another social media campaign called Asian Disney Princesses, and actually printed it too. And this is kind of like the foundation of the thesis today, but this one I used informal, type of informal kimono called yukata that Japanese people typically use in the summer because it's unlined, it's just cotton. This is all I had access to before. But now this is an opportunity for me to evolve the concept and use formal kimono. But this was a campaign that I made as a personal project, as a way to make like my own representation and see myself as these characters that I've always loved, but haven't always looked like me. So now, why kimono? So this is just a little diagram of kimono anatomy. Can I do this? Yeah. So I wore kimono for you guys today because it's a special event. And I will explain more of each of the looks that I made inspired by the Disney princesses. But as a basic anatomy breakdown, the collar here is called a haneri. Like this is obviously the kimono. And this one is specifically called a furisode because it has a very long sleeves compared to the traditional kimono that's about here. This is called an obi, the sash that holds everything together. Right here is called a obi age, which holds a little pillow that holds like the knot together. And this is an obi jime tie that also helps to hold the knot, but it's more decorative for this one. And what else? Oh, for my shoes and socks, if you guys can see, my socks are called tabi, and they have like a split in the sock where it kind of looks like hooves, kind of, where the toes are separated. And my shoes are, traditionally you're supposed to wear zori for kimono, but I didn't have access to that. So I wore geta shoes that are made of wood that is usually worn for informal yukata. And this diagram shows the various undergarments that are all under. So it's very complex, but it took me a long time to learn everything, but it was very rewarding to put everything on and by myself because I didn't have help. And for my social media career, if you guys didn't know before, between being a student, I am also a social media content creator. And so to get people like interested in the project, I've been sharing behind the scenes of how to put the kimono on. So I can share the Cinderella one while I get some water. And that was the only one that my mom actually helped tie the obi knot because it was more intricate. But now she has a job, so she couldn't really help me anymore. Is it still? Is it still full? Oh, it's okay. Okay. So now let's start looking at these stories and Kimono. So we'll start with Cinderella since we just watched the behind the scenes. And for Cinderella, I went with a theme about transformation and finding acceptance. So for this one, I interviewed Delphi Boric, who is 27, not 17, Tokyo-born, half Japanese Broadway actress who coincidentally played many princess roles in theater. So her first royal role was as the title character in Roger and Hammerstein's Cinderella for the national US tour. And the first time I saw Delphi was my friend sent me one of her Instagram posts where Delphi was dressed as Cinderella. And it made me really emotional because I had never seen like a princess that is Japanese that looks like me. So it made me really, really happy. And I didn't expect to have such a strong reaction to that. And in this production, she was actually allowed to keep her black hair. She wasn't blonde and she didn't have to be. Delphi also played Belle in Texas. And to promote the production, she was part of the Houston Thanksgiving parade. And Delphi says that in that parade, what made her really emotional was seeing all the POC kids. And that made her think of her own childhood and like going to Disneyland and seeing the parades there and not seeing any princesses that were Asian. So she was very happy to now have the opportunity to show that to the kids going to the theater. And then Delphi was cast as Ariel from The Little Mermaid, and the cast was full of diversity. There was an African-American Eric, Triton, and Sebastian was played by a Black woman. But unfortunately, comments were asking why Ariel was Chinese. Delphi is not Chinese, so they didn't even bother to do any research. And these hateful comments were saying that the theater was forcing diversity. Delphi says that this happens every single time she plays a traditionally Caucasian character. And she says that she fought back saying she's not forcing diversity, she's just showing the diversity that should have always been there. And now Delphi works on the Into the Woods revival production on Broadway, and she was actually the very first Asian actress to play Little Red Riding Hood. So for this look, as you saw in the video, for Cinderella, I used a furisode kimono, which is way more formal and is usually seen for girls' 20th birthdays. And this kimono had chrysanthemums in the pattern, which is heavily tied into the Japanese imperial family because they use chrysanthemums in the crest. The throne is called the chrysanthemum throne. So it just ties into Cinderella's journey to royalty. And there were also butterflies added to like my hair clip, and the obidome brooch in the middle was also a butterfly, and that's to tie into the 2015 live action Cinderella, and that also used butterfly motifs as a symbol of transformation and growth. And the obi sash and the knot has noble carts that kind of tied into her pumpkin carriage. And so here are some other photos, as you can see, like the butterfly brooch there, the butterflies in the hair. It was one of my favorite ones to wear. So now for Belle. For this one, the theme was about storytelling, representation, and also alienation. And I interviewed Erica Kawaguchi, who's 26, and she is Japanese, Chinese, and Puerto Rican. And she is a costume designer. And she is most known for her Star Wars cosplays, specifically of Padme Amidala. And she has always dreamed of making these dresses since she saw Star Wars as a kid in the theater, and she fell in love with Padme's wardrobe. So she loves recreating these dresses. And so did you know that Star Wars has a lot of Asian influence? So Padme has basically a kimono on for this one. It's just altered a little bit to have a more poofy silhouette. And her makeup as queen heavily resembles the makeup styles of Chinese and geisha makeup. And Darth Vader was also directly inspired by samurai armor. So his helmet was taken directly from that style. And there was even official artwork that Lucasfilm commissioned from a Japanese artist to have traditional art style inspiration. So Asian representation in Star Wars is getting a little bit better, but there's still barely any Asian characters, and at best, they're just minor characters. So in Return of the Jedi, there was the first supposedly Asian character was Lieutenant Telsig, but he was on screen for only 4 seconds before his Y-wing exploded, and he had no name until 17 years later. So not that great representation. And in the newer trilogy, when Disney bought Star Wars, actress Jessica Henwick, who is Asian, auditioned for the role for Rey, the lead of the new trilogy. But after 6 months, she was mysteriously dropped. So Erica cited her frustrations with being a fan of Star Wars and being Asian, because as she says, our culture sells, our art sells, aesthetic sells, religion sells, but what doesn't sell is our faces. And alienation of Asians is nothing new. So Time magazine, right after the Pearl Harbor attack, said that this was a premeditated murder masked by a toothy smile. And in the book, America's Geisha Ally, it explains that Japanese alien culture or depictions made it very easy for Americans to see Japanese people as the enemy, whereas even the Germans, people could kind of relate to them in some ways because they had a similar culture. And for Erica, again, as a fan, she's kind of been torn at a crossroads because she loves the Star Wars franchise and it means a lot to her, but she just really wishes that there was a character who is inspiring, strong, has a pretty wardrobe that she can recreate, and also looks like her. But in the meantime, she's just going to be keeping waiting. And for this kimono for Belle, we went with a gold homongi kimono, which has embroidered roses, which was so perfect for her. And the pattern on the fabric kind of resembles a French fleur-de-lis pattern. And for my hair, we went with a red tsumami kanzashi, which is a traditional hair ornament. And here are those pictures. We went to the pepper mill for this actually, and they had a really perfect rose wall there. So next up is Ariel, and the theme for this one was 2 worlds. So this is Amy Nelson. She's 31, and she's a flight attendant from Honolulu. And Amy was born to 2 surfers in Hawaii, her Japanese mother and American father. So she always had that connection to the ocean, and her middle name, Kai, means ocean in Japanese. And being in Hawaii made it very easy for her to fit in with Asian culture because there's a lot of prominent mixing of especially Japanese culture in Hawaii. Even foods like spam musubi is the same name as the musubi knot in a kimono. So that's like the seaweed holding the spam together. So there's things like that. And mochi is very popular in Hawaii. Saimin noodles, also like a deviation from ramen. But even then, being half Japanese, Amy still felt that there was a part of her that was missing out on some of the Japanese traditions because she had like that split family. So she started participating in more cultural events and organizations. She was part of the Honolulu Japanese Junior Chamber of Commerce, and she also joined the Cherry Blossom Festival on its 64th year as a queen contestant. So this kind of like beauty pageant, but they use this opportunity to teach these girls more traditional skills like ikebana flower arrangement, mochi pounding, things to help them connect to their culture better. And Amy also got the opportunity to wear furisode kimono with all the other queens. And this was an opportunity for her to be part of both worlds. So to continue the theme of half and two worlds, I wore a hakama, which is these trouser or skirt garment that is worn over kimono. So it kind of goes with like Ariel's mermaid tail. And hakama is actually worn by both men and women. And then under that, I wore a shibori hitoe kimono, and that means that it's hand tie-dyed. So I'll show pictures later, but if you look closely, the kimono has like little dots, and those are all hand painted. And those little dots kind of reminded me of like fish scales and ocean waves. And in my hair, I also wore a hair stick that has a little goldfish. And so here are the pictures. And I also added this single hopper or fork charm to the hakama. And you couldn't see it because the hakama was over it, but the obi had this really cute whale that I wanted to get a picture of. Okay, so up next we have Tiana, and her theme was discrimination and perseverance. So this is Iffy and Adora. When they were younger, they're now 22 and 24, but here they are as kids, and they were born in Japan, but they are half Nigerian. And they often talk about their Blasian or Black and Asian experience in Japanese online. So yes, now Iffy and Adora are all grown up, and Iffy here is now a student at the New York City Fashion Institute of Technology, and her sister Adora is an export coordinator, and they're both on social media as content creators on Instagram and YouTube talking about their Black experience in Japan. And so Iffy told me about a very prominent memory that she still has with her. So she was in elementary school when her teacher got really annoyed at her for some reason and told her to go back to her country. And she was really confused by that, not only because she was a little girl, but she said, this is my country. Because she was born in Japan, she only spoke Japanese. This is the only culture she's ever known because her Nigerian father had divorced their mom. And so she didn't have any connection to Nigerian culture. So she considered herself Japanese. But even then, her peers did not see her like that. So Japan is a very homogenous country. As the CIA World Factbook says, there's a 97.9% Japanese national population, and that means that only 1.1% are other ethnicities. So that makes Iffy and Adora and other minorities big targets for stares and harassment. Iffy and Adora told me that when they would go like grocery shopping with their mom, people would ask if they're her daughters, or they would like just stare at them without like saying anything. And at school, they were also called Bobby. And I looked into this person. Bobby Ologun is a boxer and Japanese comedian. He became a Japanese citizen, but to gain more popularity, I guess, he uses a lot of racial stereotypes, like bugging his eyes out and using animalistic sounds when he's fighting. And This is a sticker that is available in Japan still that you can use in text messages. And as you can see, there are like a lot of caricature-like depictions of Black people. And because there aren't a lot of real Black people in Japan that you see like day to day, Japanese people, sometimes their only experience with minorities is through media. And so they would see Bobby on TV and assume that all Black people were like that. And they would call Iffy and Adora Bobby just because they're Black. And Iffy and Adora online are using their platform to now show that even though they love Japan and it is their home, it isn't perfect like any country, and being different is okay. So for this kimono for Tiana, we went with an Irotomeso de kimono, which only has the design below the knees. And I also mixed in Hanshinkan modernism style, which is an art movement from the 1920s that combined Japanese and Western fashion. So for taking a traditional garment like kimono, but adding like a fascinator hat, pearl earrings, lace gloves, and heels to kind of mix in that Western American style. Oh, and there was also a little froggy brooch to go with Tiana. Here are those pictures. And this garment was actually from the 1920s, so I was very scared to wear it. And I think I'm a bit taller than people from the 1920s, so it was difficult for me to wear it. And now we're going to talk about Snow White, and her theme was homemaking and family. And I interviewed Ami Nishimura. She's 42 and she is a housewife, and she also works as a YouTuber sharing recipes online for over 10 years now. So Japanese cooking and fashion and pop culture, things like that, have been very popular on YouTube. And Ami's channel, also known as Create Eat Happy or Ochikiron, has nearly 1 million subscribers and a total of 142 million views. So she got started because after the 2011 Tohoku tsunami, Ami got stuck in her office building overnight. And in that chaos, she had a moment where she decided she needed to share something good about Japan, to bring something comforting and hopeful in a time of chaos. And so she thought about Japanese home cooking, because food is always very comforting. So she quit her job and started her YouTube channel, and she posts Japanese comfort food, cutely designed dishes, sometimes anime recreations, and she makes these for her kids, but also for her audience. And as we've seen in previous stories, Japan is still very traditional, and the idea of being an at-home housewife is still a very popular idea. So in this survey, it showed that out of 1,243 women, 53.9% of them said that they want to be housewives, to stay at home and raise the kids and take care of the house. And that idea has become less popular in other countries, but is still very much like well known in Japan. And luckily, Ami has been very well supported by her husband, who has actually motivated her to start her channel, and they work together to raise the kids and work in their respective careers. For this kimono, we went with an iromuji kimono, and that means that it's just one straight solid color. And then for Snow White's blue bodice, we went with a blue obi sash and the blue haneri collar. And then to tie into her cape, we put in a red haori, which is a type of kimono jacket. And here are those pictures. This was actually the last photo shoot that I planned because I wanted to have like the fall leaves in the background, and it worked really well with Snow White's colors. And now for Jasmine, her theme was women's rights and family structures. And for this one, as I said in the beginning, this is the story of my great-grandmother, Setsue. But since I've never met her before, to tell that story is my grandpa, Mario. And so this is a picture of the Kasato Maru. This is one of the big ships that Japanese people immigrated to Brazil with. So this is a picture of when it arrived in the Port of Santos in São Paulo in June 18th, 1908, bringing the very first Japanese immigrants to Brazil after a labor shortage following the abolishment of slavery. So Japanese workers were replacing the slaves in the coffee plantations. So because of that, they weren't getting the best wages, they weren't getting the best treatment. They literally lived in little huts that used to belong to the slaves. And my great-grandparents were part of those immigrants. So Setsue was just 11 years old when she immigrated to Brazil from Japan with her family. And so she was really, really homesick. And one of her neighbors brought in amazake, which is a type of fermented rice drink. And she was really excited because it's like a part of her home that she now gets to enjoy. But when she tasted it, it tasted really off and it made her throw up. So she went to go play with her little brother while everyone else was partying. And they discovered that the amazake was spoiled. And in 1 hour, everyone died. Setsue and her 1-year-old brother were the only survivors out of her whole family. And luckily, a kind farmer took them in and raised them for the next 9 years. But yeah, that like when I heard that story, it made me think about how me and like my parents, we almost didn't exist because of that event. So it really shocked me. So when Setsue was 20 years old, word got around to plantations that she could be a potential bride. So one of the farmers was Mr. Kumazawa from Panara, and he told his son that this would be a great wife. But nobody asked Setsue what she wanted. She was arranged to marry her soon-to-be husband, Shigeru, and they met for the very first time on their wedding day. And Setsue was actually excited by the idea because she wanted to be part of a Japanese family again since she lost everyone. But as she soon discovered, things weren't always what they seem, and she started getting abused by her father-in-law. So whenever one of the kids misbehaved or did anything wrong, Mr. Kumazawa, her father-in-law, would blame Setsue. So he would punish her by waiting for a rainy day, waking her up at 2 in the morning and telling her to go sleep outside in the rain. And as a daughter-in-law, Setsue said she couldn't say no to like the patriarch of the family because that's just how everyone was raised, looking up to the man of the household. And so she would go outside in the rain, cry by herself, and couldn't speak out, so she would just cry and cry. And now I'm really happy that I finally got to tell her story and use my project as a sort of her voice to finally share her experience. And my grandpa takes what he saw in his mom as motivation to raise his family with love and respect. And so this is an old picture of his family. So this one is my mom and all my aunts and uncles and my grandma. And this is me. And so for Jasmine's kimono, we also went with a homongi kimono with the shorter sleeves. And this was really interesting to me because kimono usually have like floral designs or like organic patterns. But this one had an architectural design featuring the Iranian Abbasi Great Shah Mosque. And for the obiage here, it had Arabesque patterns that are tied to Arab culture. And the obidome brooch had a tiger like Raja, Jasmine's pet tiger. And here are those pictures. A great advantage of living in Nevada is having great scenery for Jasmine. And last but not least, we have Rapunzel with a theme of revival and art. And you got to know a little bit about my grandpa Mario now, before, but now this is my grandma Hejina Yuriko. And as I explained in my own backstory, São Paulo has a really big population, and it has the biggest Japanese community outside of Japan. And every weekend they have a craft fair, and my grandma and grandpa have been setting up their booth for over 30 years now. And what they do is they sell like handmade paper goods such as notebooks, bookmarks, artwork using kirigami and origami techniques, the art of folding and cutting paper. So these are some examples of their little paper dolls that I grew up watching them make. So they literally, they're like this big. So they use tiny little scissors to make everything. And they're like in their 80s now. So I'm still always amazed by what they can do with their hands. And watching them make these instills my love for art as well. And as we saw in the previous story, that holds a lot of family trauma. I'm also amazed by how my family was able to take that tragedy, but also make something beautiful and new, and still share our culture with Brazilian people and sharing more of our heritage. And for Rapunzel's kimono, which I am also wearing today, this is also a furisa de kimono with the long sleeves, and it has peonies and bamboo stems. And I used a gold obi to be like Rapunzel's glowing hair. And there's a 3-strand braided obi age to be like her braided hair. And I also clipped in these pink tsumami kanzashi, the traditional hair ornaments. And I picked specifically this one because the little tassels reminded me of the sun emblem of her kingdom. And as I showed some of you already, I got the great opportunity, hold on. Oh, so these are the extra pictures of Rapunzel. But I also got the great opportunity to go to Walt Disney Animation Studios a few weeks ago, where I wore my Snow White kimono, and I specifically wore it to take a picture with the building here that is nicknamed the Giant Dwarfs that hold up the roof. And it was a great magical experience, not only being at the studio where I've been dreaming of my whole life, but also wearing a part of my culture, and the artists asking me about it and being interested made me really happy. And so I can show you the video that I made for them. that was a once in a lifetime opportunity, and I'm really happy that I again could include this project with it. So thank you, and I'm open to questions. Yes.
Well, I'm a fan. Follow her on Instagram. So I just want to say it was amazing. What
Thank
you did.
you.
Especially, I wanted to thank you for sharing your family's history. It's I know that isn't always the easiest thing to do, but it's kind of an honor to be able to carry other people's stories on that way.
Thank you. Yeah, I got really emotional because my grandpa was telling the story, and he's always been like this sunshiny person. So to see him like getting really like into those memories and revealing that trauma like made me really emotional. But at the end, he was saying like how lucky we are that even though we're like 6,000 miles away, because he's still in Brazil, we can have like these conversations still and talk about our family like in real time, basically with video chatting.
It's hard to interview someone who's in a position of trauma themselves at the time too. So I think that, you know, doing that is really good.
Yeah, for sure. Was there someone in the chat? Oh, so Amy is here. She was the representative for Ariel. Yeah. So connecting to Kimono and culture. So thank you guys. Oh yes. Are they all muted? I'm not sure.
Are you able to hear me?
Oh yes, thank you.
Okay. First of all, I just wanted to say that I thought you did a great job, especially with the attention to detail. The fact that
Yeah.
each kimono has significance to different aspects of each of the princesses, I think is so stellar. And you already know that I've read your bachelor's thesis as well. And
Thank
so
you.
the fact that you were able to tie in some of those same concepts, you were talking about all the positive qualities princesses have, and you tied that into the kimono so well. And I love how you were able to take some of these modern or somewhat modern stories and bring it together with the princesses, like talking about Amy and being half Japanese, half American, which I can relate to. With all that being said, there isn't a Disney princess who experiences that kind of story. There isn't a princess who is mixed in any way. There isn't a princess who has experienced what you have experienced, traveling and immigrating to the United States, even though you're of Japanese heritage from Brazil. So what more do you think it would take? Now, I know this is speculation. You don't, you're not the Disney Corporation, but what do you think it would take in order for us to see that kind of representation in our Disney princesses?
I think we're getting there with stories like Tiana's from Princess and the Frog, and with Pixar's like Turning Red, showing more diverse characters. There is a call like from the community to have more diverse characters and stories, because we have so many stories to tell, but it seems that only a few certain people are getting to share those stories. So I like being able to go to a Disney animation also made me see like the artists behind these productions. And they had like this wall with a map that has the countries of where every artist came from. And it's really like widespread. They're all from all over the world. But it's getting them, like these artists, to be able to like pitch their stories and for them to be shown value in their stories to these big corporations, I think is one of the biggest problem, to show that we can be marketable in a way, but also that these stories are important and that people will enjoy them. So I think, yeah, it's still a great challenge, but I think we're going in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking a question too, Amy. going to the Disney Animation Studios, and Kimono inspired them to animate the Japanese princesses we've been waiting for. For sure. I got some comments from artists saying, like, talking about the artwork of Kimono, because they're like handcrafted. So there's so much value, and they are like pieces of artwork that you can wear. And so they were saying like this would be like a great visual treat for a movie and a character. So yeah, I really hope that there is a princess like that one day, or at least any Asian Japanese character. Anyone else?
Questions or comments from any guests? If there's not any more, then thank you so much for coming, and maybe we'll stay. Thank you guys.
Thank
And also
you.
online guests, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Hi, thank you. Do I stay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, online is only guests, right? So do you want to stop this? So are you recording or?
Yeah, I'm recording.
Okay.
Oh, thank you, everyone.